The first time I watched a human die, I laughed. Not because I am cruel, mind you. I am Korvax of the Third Hegemony, and we Vorthak take death seriously. But this particular human, this Jake Morrison, had just blown himself up trying to fix our quantum drive with nothing but scrap metal and what he called good old-fashioned elbow grease. The explosion painted him across 3 bulkheads in a spectacular display of red and pink that would have made our finest artists weep with envy. What made me laugh was not his death. It was what he said right before the blast. "Hold my beer and watch this." I did not know what beer was at the time. I assumed it was some sort of ceremonial weapon. The humans had been prisoners of war for 6 cycles, and we had grown fond of their peculiar ways. They fixed things that should not be fixable. They made jokes while bleeding. They sang songs that made no sense while performing miracles with technology they barely understood. But mostly, they died. A lot, and somehow, this made them more dangerous, not less. The war between the Galactic Coalition and the human species had been raging for 12 standard years when High Commander Grex made the decision that would doom us all. He decided to put human prisoners to work in our engineering corps, use their primitive ingenuity, he said during the war council. Let them maintain our ships while our real engineers focus on important tasks. I should have seen the trap then. Should have recognized the gleam in Jake Morrison's eyes as he volunteered for maintenance duty. Should have questioned why a species that had never mastered faster-than-light travel was so eager to get their hands on our quantum drives. But I was young then. Foolish. I thought humans were just another conquered species, remarkable only for their stubborn refusal to surrender despite being outgunned, outmanned, and completely outclassed in every measure of technological advancement. How wrong I was. The Chasm battle happened 3 months after Jake's explosive demise. We were conducting a routine patrol near the Kepler void when our sensors detected a massive human fleet emerging from hyperspace. 200 vessels strong, bristling with weapons that our computers could not identify. At their head flew a ship that defied every law of physics I had ever learned. It was enormous. Bigger than our dreadnoughts. Bigger than our space stations. The thing was easily 5 kilometers long and covered in armor plating that seemed to shimmer and bend light around its edges. Our tactical officer, a nervous Vorthak named Morth, ran the scans 3 times before he believed what he was seeing. "Commander Korvax," he said, his voice trembling like a leaf in a cosmic storm. "That ship, it is reading as constructed primarily from scrap metal." I stared at the display screen. The massive vessel looked like someone had taken every piece of debris in the galaxy and somehow forged it into the most beautiful instrument of destruction I had ever witnessed. Hull plating from a dozen different species, engine components that belonged to vessels separated by thousands of light-years, weapon systems that should never work together but somehow created a harmony of devastating potential. "Impossible," I muttered. "Humans lacked the technology to build something like that." That was when the communications array crackled to life. A human voice, calm and collected, spoke across the void with the kind of confidence that comes from holding all the cards in a very deadly game. "This is Admiral Emma Stone of the Terran Federation battlecruiser Defiance. You have exactly 60 seconds to surrender all human prisoners and withdraw from this system. Failure to comply will result in your immediate and total annihilation." High Commander Grex, commanding our fleet from the bridge of the mighty Sovereign's wrath, actually laughed. "Human female. You pilot a ship made of garbage. We command 300 vessels of the finest military engineering in the galaxy. Your threats amuse us." There was a pause. Then Admiral Stone's voice returned, and I swear I could hear her smiling. "Commander Grex, let me explain something about garbage. When you throw away broken things, you assume they are worthless. But humans, we see potential. That quantum drive your prisoner Jake Morrison blew himself up working on, he was not trying to fix it. He was learning how it worked. Every human you put to work in your engineering departments was doing the same thing. Learning, adapting, improving." The display screen shifted, showing detailed schematics of our own ship systems. Information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. "We know the resonance frequency of your shield generators," Admiral Stone continued. "We know the power coupling limitations of your weapon systems. We know exactly how much punishment your armor can take before it fails. Most importantly, we know that you keep your human prisoners in the lower engineering decks." My blood turned to ice. The human prisoners. There were still thousands of them scattered throughout our fleet, working in the bowels of our ships, maintaining systems that kept us alive in the endless void of space. High Commander Grex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "All ships, secure human prisoners immediately. Transfer them to detention centers and lock down all engineering sections." But it was too late. The first explosion came from the destroyer's edge, a massive battleship positioned on our fleet's left flank. The ship simply folded in half, not from external weapons fire, but from internal detonations that erupted in perfect sequence along the vessel's spine. Within seconds, what had been a proud warship became a cloud of glittering debris. Then the Voidwalker exploded. Then the Star Pierce. Then the Storm's End. One by one, our finest vessels were being destroyed from within by humans who had spent months learning every detail of our technology while pretending to be helpless prisoners. "All remaining ships, emergency jump to hyperspace," Grex commanded, his voice cracking with panic. "Retreat immediately." But Admiral Stone's voice cut through our communications again, and this time there was steel wrapped in velvet. "Oh, Commander, I am afraid that is not going to work. You see, your human maintenance crews have been very busy these past few months." Jake Morrison may have blown himself up, but not before he figured out how to introduce a small modification to your hyperspace navigation systems. I watched in horror as our ships tried to jump to hyperspace. Nothing happened. The quantum drive spun up, energy readings climbed to maximum. And then nothing. We were trapped in normal space with a human fleet that somehow knew everything about our technology. "Surrender now," Admiral Stone said, "and we might let some of you live." High Commander Grex's response was predictable. "All ships, attack formation. Show these primitive apes what real military might looks like." The battle that followed lasted exactly 17 minutes and 32 seconds. I know because I timed it. I had to. I needed something concrete to hold on to as my understanding of the universe crumbled around me. The human ships moved like they were alive. They did not fly in the rigid formations we had been taught were tactically sound. Instead, they danced, they swooped and dove and spun in patterns that should have been chaotic but somehow created a deadly harmony that tore through our defenses like paper. Their weapons were impossible. Lasers that curved around obstacles, missiles that split into smaller missiles that split again into clouds of micro-explosives, kinetic rounds that somehow changed direction mid-flight to strike weak points in our armor with surgical precision. But the worst part was how they laughed while they killed us. I could hear them over the open communication channels, human voices whooping and cheering as they systematically dismantled the most powerful fleet in the Galactic Coalition. They were having fun. They were enjoying themselves while turning our dreadnoughts into scrap metal. Yahaw! Did you see that shot, Sarah? Outstanding work, Marcus. Let us see if we can thread the needle on that cruiser. Emma, the Sovereign's wrath is trying to run. Should we let them go? Admiral Stone's voice returned, calm and professional amidst the chaos of battle. Negative, Jake. No one leaves. We have a point to make. Jake? But Jake Morrison was dead. I had seen him die. I had watched his blood paint the bulkheads of our ship 3 months ago. That was when I understood the true horror of what we faced. The humans had not just learned our technology, they had improved on it. They had taken our quantum drives and somehow found a way to resurrect their dead. Jake Morrison, the man who had blown himself up learning how our ships worked, was alive again and flying a fighter craft that moved like a dream and struck like a nightmare. The Sovereign's wrath, flagship of our mighty fleet, died last. Admiral Stone's Defiance approached the massive vessel with the slow, deliberate pace of a predator savoring its kill. The human ship extended what looked like a mechanical arm, grabbed onto our command vessel's bridge section, and simply squeezed. The bridge crumpled like soft metal in a giant's fist. High Commander Grex's final transmission was barely a whisper. How? How did you do this? Admiral Stone's response echoed across the battlefield, carried by speakers on every human ship so that all survivors could hear her words clearly. You wanted to know about human garbage, Commander? Here is your lesson. When we break something, we do not throw it away. We take it apart. We study every piece. We learn what made it fail. Then we build something better. Your ships, your weapons, your technology, all of it was just raw material waiting for us to make it into something worthy. She paused, and I could almost see her looking out at the debris field that had once been our fleet. You treated us like broken tools to be discarded. But humans do not break, Commander. We adapt. We evolve. We overcome. And now, thanks to your generosity in teaching us how your technology works, we are going to take this war to every corner of your empire. The transmission ended. The battle was over. Of our 300 ships, only 7 remained functional. Of those, only 3 were still capable of hyperspace travel. The rest of us were left floating in the void, watching the human fleet form up around the massive vessel they called Defiance. As I sat in the emergency bunker where I would spend the next 6 hours waiting for rescue, I finally understood what Jake Morrison had been trying to tell us all along. Humans do not fix things the way we do. They do not simply repair what is broken and return it to its original function. They take broken things and make them into something new, something better, something that should not be possible, but somehow they had taken our cast-off prisoners and turned them into the foundation of their victory. They had taken our scrap metal and built it into ships that defied everything we thought we knew about engineering. They had taken our technology and transformed it into weapons that made our finest military hardware look like children's toys. Most terrifying of all, they had taken our contempt for their primitive nature and used it as the perfect camouflage while they learned everything they needed to destroy us. The humans did not just win the chasm battle. They had turned it into a demonstration. A message to every species in the galaxy that underestimating humanity was a mistake you only got to make once. As I watched their fleet prepare to jump to hyperspace, probably to carry their new hybrid technology to other battlefields, I realized that the war we thought we were winning was over. It had been over the moment we decided to put human prisoners to work in our engineering departments. The humans had not just defied the chasm between their primitive technology and our advanced civilization. They had bridged it. They had crossed it. And now they owned both sides. The rescue ship that eventually found us carried news from across the galaxy. Human fleets were appearing everywhere, all of them equipped with impossible hybrid technology that combined the best of every species they had encountered. Ships that should not exist were tearing through coalition defenses like they were made of paper. But the most chilling news came from the intelligence division. Human prisoners throughout the galaxy were disappearing, not escaping, simply vanishing, along with detailed schematics of every piece of technology they had been working on. We had not been at war with humanity. We had been teaching them. For 12 years we had been showing them everything we knew while they pretended to be helpless prisoners waiting for rescue. The joke, as the humans would say, was on us. And Jake Morrison, wherever he was in whatever impossible ship the humans had built around his resurrected consciousness, was probably still laughing. 6 months after the chasm battle, I stood in the ruins of what had been the greatest military academy in the galaxy, watching human children play with toys that could level mountains. The irony was not lost on me. The Hegemony War College on Zerion Prime had trained 10,000 years of military officers. Its crystalline spires had reached toward the stars like fingers grasping for divine knowledge. Its libraries contained the strategic wisdom of 100 conquered civilizations. Its simulation chambers had birthed the tactical brilliance that built our empire. Now it was a playground. Human children, no older than 12 standard years, were running through the rubble with devices they had built from academy wreckage. Little Beth Kim held what appeared to be a broken communication array, but when she pointed it at a statue of Grand Admiral Vuth, the monument simply evaporated, turned to dust, and blew away in the evening breeze. "Nice shot, Beth," called out Tommy Rodriguez, a gap-toothed boy who was assembling what looked like a miniature starship from pieces of our former tactical computer. "Think you can hit the fountain from here?" Beth grinned and adjusted her improvised weapon. The fountain, a 200-ton monument carved from native stone and reinforced with quantum-bonded ceramics, disappeared in a flash of golden light. I turned to Captain Sarah Williams, the human officer assigned to oversee the, and I quote, educational opportunities at our former academy. "Captain, your children are playing with weapons that could destroy entire city blocks." She looked at me with those unsettling human eyes, so expressive and alive compared to our dignified compound lenses. Then she smiled, and I felt that familiar chill that all Vorthak had learned to associate with human amusement. "Commander Korvax, those are not weapons. Those are learning tools. Beth and Tommy are figuring out how molecular cohesion works by taking apart your monuments. They will probably invent 3 new technologies before dinner." "Learning tools," I repeated slowly. "They are disintegrating matter at the quantum level." "Exactly. Last week, 8-year-old Marcus Chen figured out how to reverse the process. He turned a pile of sand into a working starship engine. We are very proud. This was the new reality. The humans had not simply conquered us. They had turned our children into scientists and our prisons into research facilities. They had taken our most sacred sites and transformed them into whatever this was supposed to be. The worst part was that they claimed to be helping us. "The transition period is always difficult," Admiral Stone had explained during the surrender negotiations on the bridge of her impossible ship. "But we promise that every species that joins the Terran Federation will benefit from our partnership. We do not want subjects. We want friends, as if friendship was possible after they had systematically dismantled the most powerful military force in galactic history using nothing but scrap metal and what they called creative problem-solving. The negotiations themselves had been a masterpiece of human psychological warfare. Admiral Stone had conducted them in the wreckage of our command ship, surrounded by the bodies of our finest officers, while human technicians casually stripped useful components from our dead vessels. The message was clear: we had nothing left to bargain with except our willingness to cooperate. "We understand that this situation is awkward," the Admiral had said, gesturing at the debris field that had once been our fleet. "But we would like to propose a different approach to interstellar relations. Instead of conquest and submission, we suggest collaboration and mutual benefit." High Admiral Grex, miraculously still alive despite the destruction of his flagship, had laughed bitterly. "Collaboration? You have just destroyed 300 of our finest vessels. What could we possibly offer that you cannot simply take?" Admiral Stone had leaned forward, and for a moment I saw something in her expression that was far more terrifying than anger or hatred. I saw genuine curiosity. "Admiral, you seem to misunderstand our position. We did not destroy your fleet because we wanted your territory or your resources. We destroyed it because you were holding our people prisoner and treating them as disposable labor. Now that we have resolved that issue, we would like to discuss the future." She had gestured to the massive hybrid ships floating around us. Vessels that combined human ingenuity with the best technology from dozens of species. "We have learned that the galaxy is full of brilliant civilizations, each with unique approaches to science and engineering. Your quantum drive technology, for example, is elegant and efficient. The Contharen shield matrices are nearly impenetrable. The Zephyrian energy weapons are works of art. Separately, each species has created remarkable achievements. But together," she had smiled, and I still wake up sometimes thinking about that smile. "Together we can build something magnificent." That had been 6 months ago. Now I was watching human children casually violate the laws of physics while their parents discussed plans for something they called the Great Work. The Great Work, as it turned out, was nothing less than the complete restructuring of galactic civilization. Not through conquest or subjugation, but through what humans called aggressive cooperation. Every species that surrendered to the Terran Federation was immediately inducted into a program they called technological synthesis. Human teams would arrive on conquered worlds and begin the process of combining local knowledge with their growing database of galactic science. The results were unprecedented. On Keth Prime, human engineers worked with native crystal singers to develop communication systems that could transmit thoughts across interstellar distances. On Valaris, human doctors collaborated with Valerian bioshapers to create medical techniques that could regrow entire organs in minutes. On Viserion, human physicists teamed up with our own quantum theorists to design engines that could fold space-time like paper. The humans called it collaboration. Those of us who remembered the old order called it something else entirely. "Korvax, you look troubled," Captain Williams said, watching her children continue their casual demolition of our former academy. "Is something wrong?" I gestured at the destruction surrounding us. Captain, this was the most prestigious military institution in the galaxy. Generals who conquered star systems learned their craft within these walls, and now it is teaching children how the universe actually works instead of how to kill people more efficiently, she finished. Yes, I can see how that would be disturbing for someone who spent their career in the old system. The old system. As if our 10,000-year empire was just a phase we had grown out of. But that was the thing about humans. They did not see our defeat as the end of Vorthak's civilization. They saw it as the beginning of something better. They had taken our warriors and turned them into teachers. They had taken our weapons and transformed them into tools. They had taken our pride and somehow convinced us that cooperation was more honorable than conquest. And the terrifying part was that it was working. Our people were healthier than they had ever been, thanks to human medical technology enhanced with Vorthak precision engineering. Our worlds were more prosperous than ever before thanks to trade networks that spanned the galaxy without requiring military subjugation. Our young people were learning sciences that we had never imagined possible, creating innovations that made our greatest achievements look primitive. But none of that explained why I was really troubled. Captain, I said carefully, what happens when the great work is complete? She looked at me with those two expressive eyes, and I saw something there that made my circulatory fluid run cold. It was the same expression Admiral Stone had worn during the surrender negotiations. The expression of someone who saw possibilities that others could not even imagine. Korvax, let me ask you a question. What do you think we found when we first ventured out into the galaxy and encountered your empire? I considered the question. A more advanced civilization that you decided to challenge despite being technologically inferior. She shook her head. We found a galaxy full of brilliant species that had been forced to waste their potential on endless warfare. Civilizations that should have been exploring the deepest mysteries of existence were instead focused on building bigger weapons and conquering more territory. She gestured at the children who had moved on to building what appeared to be a miniature space station from rubble and discarded technology. We found a universe that was stuck, trapped in cycles of violence and domination that prevented anyone from reaching their true potential. So we decided to unstick it, by destroying everyone who disagreed with you, by giving everyone something better to do than fight each other. She pulled out a small device, something that looked like a combination of human electronics and Vorthak quantum processors. The screen showed a map of the galaxy, with thousands of points of light representing worlds that had joined the Terran Federation. The great work is not about building better weapons or conquering more territory, Korax. It is about answering the fundamental questions that every intelligent species has asked since the beginning of time. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What lies beyond the edge of the observable universe? The map shifted, showing data streams flowing between worlds, representing the constant exchange of knowledge and discoveries that characterize the new galactic order. Every species brings unique perspectives to these questions. Vorthak quantum mathematics, Catharon energy manipulation, Zephyrian bioengineering, human adaptability and synthesis. Separately, we might spend millions of years working toward answers, but together, the map changed again, and I found myself looking at something that defied comprehension. Star charts that showed regions of space where the laws of physics appeared to be different. Energy readings that suggested the existence of matter types that should not be possible. Mathematical proofs that indicated the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had ever suspected. Together, we are going to rebuild reality itself. I stared at the display, trying to process what she was showing me. The humans had not just conquered the galaxy. They had turned it into a laboratory. Every world, every species, every breakthrough was part of a vast experiment designed to unlock the fundamental secrets of existence. You are insane, I whispered. Captain Williams laughed, and the sound was warm and infectious. Several of the children looked up from their projects and giggled along with her. Korax, sanity is a luxury we cannot afford. The universe is vast and strange and full of wonders that we can barely imagine. We can either spend our time fighting each other over resources and territory, or we can work together to explore the infinite mysteries that surround us. She put away the device and looked at me with an expression that was somehow both gentle and absolutely terrifying. Your people were warriors, Korvax. You conquered worlds and built an empire that lasted 10,000 years, That is no small achievement. But now we are offering you the chance to conquer something far more challenging than mere planets and star systems. What? The unknown. That evening, I watched the human children put on a demonstration for their parents. Using nothing but salvaged academy equipment and materials they had scrounged from the ruins, they had built a working model of something they called a dimensional probe. The device was about the size of a human child, constructed from what appeared to be random pieces of debris welded together with no regard for aesthetic considerations. It looked like exactly what it was, a toy built by children from garbage. When they activated it, reality tore open like fabric. Through the tear I could see something, a place that was not a place, where light moved in spirals and matter existed in states that had no names. In the distance, if distance had any meaning in such a space, I could see structures that might have been buildings or might have been living creatures or might have been mathematical concepts given physical form. "Cool," shouted Tommy Rodriguez. "Beth, look. I think those are cities." Beth peered through the opening in space-time with the casual curiosity of a child examining an interesting insect. "Are those people moving around in there?" "Hard to tell," said Marcus Chen, making adjustments to the device with the confidence of someone who had been manipulating fundamental forces since before he could walk properly. "The physics are all weird on the other side." "Want me to send a probe through?" "Kids," called Captain Williams from across the courtyard, "remember the safety rules. No unauthorized dimensional exploration until after homework is finished." "Oh, Mom," several children complained in unison. The tier in reality sealed itself with a sound like cosmic wind chimes, leaving behind only the faintest shimmer in the air and the memory of impossible vistas. I turned to Captain Williams, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to remain composed. "Those children just opened a gateway to another dimension, using toys made from garbage." "I know," she said proudly. "They are getting so much better at it. Last month they could only hold the portals open for a few seconds." "Captain, that technology, it could revolutionize our understanding of existence itself. It could open doorways to realms we have never imagined. It could change everything," she agreed. "And it will. That is what the great work is really about, Korvax. We are not just rebuilding civilization, we are preparing for the next phase of existence." She looked at me with an expression that was patient and kind and absolutely implacable. "Your empire lasted 10,000 years by conquering space. Our federation is going to last forever by conquering the impossible." As I walked home through the ruins of what had been our greatest achievement, I finally understood the true scope of what we faced. The humans had not just defeated us militarily. They had made our entire concept of victory obsolete. We had measured success in terms of worlds conquered and enemies defeated. They measured it in terms of mysteries solved and impossibilities made real. We had built an empire that could dominate a galaxy. They were building something that could reshape the fundamental nature of existence. And they were doing it with garbage, laughter, and the unshakable belief that any problem could be solved if you approached it from the right angle. The worst part was that they were probably right. 2 years after watching children tear holes in reality with playground equipment, I found myself standing on the bridge of humanity's greatest impossibility, watching them prepare to kill God. The ship was called Infinity's Edge, though calling it a ship was like calling a supernova a candle. It stretched across 17 light minutes of space, a construct so vast that entire solar systems could fit comfortably within its hull. Every piece of it had been built from what humans called collaborative engineering, combining technologies from every species in their growing federation. But the most terrifying part was not its size. It was the fact that most of it should not exist. "Admiral Stone," I said, my voice carefully controlled despite the cosmic horror surrounding us, "that engine configuration violates at least 47 laws of physics." She turned from the command console where she was making final adjustments to systems that hurt to look at directly. Her hair had gone completely white during the 2 years since our surrender, but her eyes still held that unsettling combination of warmth and absolute determination that made humans so dangerous. "Korvax, my friend. Those laws were suggestions, guidelines for a universe that was operating at maybe 3% of its actual potential." She gestured at the impossible machinery surrounding us. "We decided to give it a performance upgrade, The bridge itself defied description. Consoles made from living metal that grew and adapted in real time, displays that showed information in dimensions that most species could not perceive, control systems that responded to thoughts, emotions, and mathematical concepts rather than physical manipulation. In the center of it all sat something that had once been High Admiral Grex. The transformation had been voluntary, he assured me whenever I asked. After 18 months of watching humans casually violate everything he had ever believed about the nature of existence, he had requested to undergo what they called consciousness integration. Now he existed as something between biological intelligence and pure information, his awareness distributed across the ship's quantum processing matrix. Corax. His voice echoed from speakers throughout the bridge, though I knew he was also present in the walls, the air, and the space between atoms. You still think too small. We are not killing God. We are giving God a job interview. The target of our mission hung in the display screens like a wound in space itself. The architects, as they called themselves, were the species responsible for setting up the fundamental constants that governed physical reality. They had been hiding behind layers of dimensional barriers for eons, occasionally adjusting universal parameters when lesser civilizations got too close to discovering the truth. Humanity had found them 6 months ago. The discovery had happened typically by accident. Dr. Lisa Park, a physicist working on one of the children's dimensional probe projects, had noticed patterns in the quantum fluctuations that suggested intelligent design, not the vague philosophical kind of intelligent design that civilizations use to explain away mysteries they could not solve, but actual deliberate engineering of space-time itself. Someone built this universe, she had announced during a research meeting that I had been allowed to observe. And they are still here making adjustments. The room had gone silent. Even the humans, who had grown accustomed to casual impossibilities, seemed stunned by the implications. Then Admiral Stone had smiled that terrifying smile and said, "Well then, I suppose we should introduce ourselves." The war that followed made our previous conflicts look like children playing with toy soldiers. The architects commanded technologies that existed outside the normal flow of cause and effect. They could unmake entire star systems by editing the mathematical foundations that allowed matter to exist. They could rewrite history so that entire civilizations never developed. They could fold space and time into configurations that turned military fleets into abstract art. Humanity's response was characteristically direct. If they can edit reality, Admiral Stone had explained during the strategy meeting, then we need to become reality editors ourselves. What followed was the most intensive period of technological development in galactic history. Every species in the Terran Federation was mobilized for something called Project Impossibility. Vorthak quantum mathematicians worked with Catharan energy shapers and Zephyrian bioengineers and human synthesis specialists to create weapons that could function in environments where the laws of physics were actively hostile. The first battle had taken place in what humans called metaspace, a region where mathematical concepts could engage in direct combat with physical forces. We lost. The architects simply deleted our attack fleet from existence, erasing them so thoroughly that even the memory of their construction faded from reality. The second battle had been fought in the past, after the architects attempted to prevent humanity from ever developing space travel. That battle we won, but only because young Marcus Chen had figured out how to build time weapons from temporal paradoxes and quantum uncertainty. I still do not understand how a 12-year-old solved causality engineering, but then I had stopped trying to understand human children after the dimensional portal incident. The third battle had been fought in the space between thoughts, where ideas battled for the right to become real. The architects had tried to convince the universe that humans had never existed. Humanity had responded by making themselves so conceptually powerful that reality refused to function without them. After that, the architects had agreed to peace negotiations. Terms are simple. Admiral Stone had transmitted across dimensions that had no names. Either you accept humanity as an equal partner in universal management, or we will build our own universe and run it better than yours. The architects had responded by laughing, a sound that manifested as supernovas across 17 galaxies. Primitive species, you cannot build a universe. You lack the fundamental understanding of existence required for such a task. Admiral Stone's reply had been delivered by having Beth Kim, now 14 and working on her doctoral thesis in applied impossibility, casually create a pocket universe during a school science fair. The miniature cosmos, complete with its own laws of physics and populated by self-aware mathematical entities, had won first prize. The message was clear: challenge accepted. Now we were approaching the architect's home dimension, carrying technology that should not exist to confront beings who had designed existence itself. The plan was either brilliant or insane. Possibly both. "All stations, prepare for dimensional breach," Admiral Stone announced. "Remember, everyone, we are about to enter a space where thinking too hard about something can make it real. Keep your minds focused on the mission parameters, and try not to accidentally create any paradoxes." The breach opened like a flower made of pure mathematics, revealing a realm where concepts had weight and possibilities cast shadows. Through the opening, I could see the architect's true form, beings of living geometry that existed as both points and infinite expanses simultaneously. They were beautiful, and terrible, and absolutely, utterly convinced of their own superiority. So one of them spoke, its voice arriving before it finished thinking the words. "The clever apes have finally found us. Do you truly believe you can challenge beings who predate existence itself?" Admiral Stone stepped forward, and I watched reality bend around her like water around a stone. During the past 2 years, she had undergone modifications that made her something more than human, though she insisted she was still fundamentally herself. "Revered architects," she said with precisely the right amount of respect to avoid being condescending, "we do not wish to challenge you. We wish to apply for membership in your organization." The architect's geometric form shifted through configurations that hurt to perceive. "Membership? You are barely evolved primates. You have existed for mere moments on the cosmic scale. What could you possibly offer beings who have shaped reality for billions of years?" Admiral Stone gestured, and the space around us filled with images. Human children building impossible devices from scrap metal. Vorthak mathematicians discovering new forms of infinity. Cortheron artists creating sculptures from pure energy. Zephyrian engineers growing machines that were also living creatures. All of it coordinated, synthesized, and enhanced by human creativity and determination. "We offer perspective," she said simply. "You have been managing this universe for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to discover something new. When was the last time any of you were surprised? When did you last encounter a problem that you could not solve by simply editing the underlying mathematical structure?" The architects exchanged communications that manifested as colors that had no names and sounds that existed only in theory. "We are eternal. We are perfect. We require no assistance from temporary biological constructs." That was when Admiral Stone smiled, and I felt reality itself shiver in anticipation. "Really? Then explain this." She held up a small device, no larger than her fist, constructed from materials that appeared to be ordinary scrap metal. It looked like something one of the human children might have built during lunch break. The architects focused their attention on the device, and I watched their geometric forms flicker with confusion. "Impossible," one of them whispered. "That configuration should not function. The energy requirements alone would require the mass of a dozen stars. And yet," Admiral Stone said cheerfully, "8-year-old Tommy Rodriguez built it last week using spare parts from a broken communication array and what he called really good engineering." She activated the device. Reality hiccuped. For just a moment, the fundamental constants that governed existence changed. Gravity became a suggestion. Time ran backward for 3 seconds before resuming its normal flow. The speed of light doubled, then tripled, then settled into a value that made mathematics more elegant. Then everything returned to normal, leaving only the echo of impossibility and the memory of a universe that worked better than it should. "How?" The architect's voice carried harmonics of confusion that caused nearby space to fold into question marks. "We taught our children that the laws of physics were more like guidelines," Admiral Stone explained. "They took that lesson to its logical conclusion. Tommy's device does not generate enough energy to function according to your universal constants, so it temporarily adjusts the constants to match its energy output." The silence that followed was so profound that it created a small pocket of absolute vacuum in the space between atoms. "You are teaching children to edit reality," another architect said slowly. "Of course, someone has to take over when we retire." "Retire?" The concept seemed to cause the architects physical pain. We do not retire. We are eternal custodians of existence itself. Admiral Stone's expression became gentle, almost pitying. And that is exactly the problem. You have been doing the same job for billions of years. No wonder the universe has gotten stagnant. No wonder evolution keeps hitting dead ends. No wonder every intelligent species eventually gets trapped in cycles of warfare and competition. She gestured at the impossible ship surrounding us, at the crew of former enemies working together to achieve the unthinkable. When was the last time you tried something new? When did you last experiment with different forms of existence? When did you last create something just to see if it was possible? The architects' forms began to shift and change as they processed this concept. I could see mathematical equations flowing across their surfaces as they attempted to quantify the idea of innovation for its own sake. We maintain order, one of them said finally. We preserve stability. Without our guidance, reality would collapse into chaos. Really? Admiral Stone pulled out another device. This one built by Beth Kim from Quantum Uncertainty and Crystallized Possibility. Let me show you what chaos looks like when it is properly organized. What happened next defied every attempt at description I have ever made. The device created a small region of space where cause and effect operated according to principles that had never existed before. Within that space, impossible things became mundane and mundane things became impossible. Time flowed in spirals. Matter existed in states that were both solid and liquid and gaseous, and something else entirely. Energy behaved like a living creature, with curiosity and opinions. And it was beautiful. More than beautiful. It was perfect in ways that the current universe, for all its elegance, could never be. It was reality unleashed from the constraints of consistency, free to explore forms and functions that had never been tried simply because they had never been imagined. The effect lasted only seconds before the device shut itself down, unable to sustain such an extreme violation of everything. But those seconds were enough. The architects stared at the space where the impossible had briefly been possible, their ancient minds struggling to process what they had witnessed. You created a region of space where our fundamental laws were irrelevant, one of them said slowly. Not violated, not broken. Simply unnecessary. We created a place where new laws could exist, Admiral Stone corrected. Laws that we had never thought to write because we were too busy following the old ones. Another long silence filled the dimensional space around us. When the architects finally spoke, their voices carried harmonics I had never heard before. Wonder, uncertainty, and something that might have been excitement. Show us more. What followed was the strangest job interview in the history of existence. Admiral Stone presented a portfolio of human achievements that included universe editing by children, military strategies that won by losing, and technological solutions that worked by ignoring the problems they were supposed to solve. The architects, beings who had managed reality for longer than most stars had existed, found themselves taking notes. Your proposal, one of them said, finally, is to completely restructure the management of existence itself. Our proposal is to give existence room to grow, Admiral Stone replied. You have built a wonderful universe, but you built it to be stable and predictable. We want to help it become magnificent. And if this experiment fails, if reality collapses under the strain of constant innovation, Admiral Stone shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to be casual and profound at the same time. Then we build a better one, from scratch if necessary. The architects exchanged communications that manifested as mathematical theorems that proved their own impossibility before vanishing into recursive loops of self-contradiction. Very well, they said finally. We accept your application for partnership. But understand, humans, that you are proposing to take responsibility for the fundamental nature of existence itself. Are you prepared for such a burden? Admiral Stone looked around the bridge of our impossible ship, at the crew of former enemies who had become friends, at the human officers working alongside alien colleagues to achieve the unthinkable. She looked at me, a Vorthak warrior who had spent his career conquering worlds and was now learning to conquer impossibilities. Burden, she said and laughed. We call that Tuesday. 6 months later, I was standing in what had once been a classroom on Zurion Prime, watching human children work alongside young architects to redesign the fundamental constants of physics. The project was supposed to make stars burn more efficiently, but Tommy Rodriguez had suggested that they also try to make them sing. The results were interesting. Now every sunrise across the galaxy came with a different melody, composed by nuclear fusion and performed by stellar winds. Poets wrote verses to match the cosmic symphonies. Musicians learned to play instruments tuned to the frequency of distant suns. Beth Kim, now 16 and serving as humanity's first apprentice architect, was working on a project to give gravity a sense of humor. Early tests had been promising, though we were still working out some issues with objects falling upward when they heard particularly good jokes. "Korax," she called out as I entered the classroom. "Want to see something cool?" I had learned that when human children used the phrase "something cool," the wise response was to find adequate shelter and prepare for reality to behave unexpectedly. "What is it this time, Beth?" She held up a device that appeared to be constructed from equal parts advanced technology and finger paint. I figured out how to make time skip like a stone across water. "Watch this." She activated the device and Tuesday briefly became Thursday before bouncing back to Wednesday and settling into a compromise that we decided to call Thursday. "Fascinating," I said, using the tone I had learned to employ when discussing casual violations of causality. "Any practical applications?" "Well, we can use it to skip past boring parts of meetings, and I think we can teach it to skip backward, which would let us retry conversations that do not go well." I considered this. Since joining the Terran Federation, I had participated in negotiations with beings of pure energy, tactical planning sessions conducted in 11 dimensions simultaneously, and diplomatic meetings where the participants included mathematical concepts that had achieved sentience. The ability to skip past tedious portions of such encounters would indeed be useful. "Excellent work, Beth. Just remember to file the proper safety reports before testing it on anything larger than a school day." She grinned and returned to her work, casually adjusting the fundamental nature of temporal mechanics with the confidence of someone who had grown up believing that impossible was just another word for not yet. As I walked home through the rebuilt city, I reflected on how much had changed since that first day when I had watched Jake Morrison blow himself up trying to fix our quantum drive. We had thought ourselves the masters of the galaxy, superior in every way to the primitive humans we had captured. We had been wrong about everything. Humans had not been primitive. They had been adaptive. They had not been inferior. They had been innovative. They had not been conquered by us. We had been educated by them. And now, working alongside the architects themselves, they were rewriting the rules of existence to make room for wonders that had never been possible before. The irony was perfect. We had captured them as prisoners and put them to work fixing our broken technology. In the end, they had fixed something far more important than our ships. They had fixed the universe itself. And they had done it with scrap metal, determination, and the unshakable human belief that any problem could be solved if you were willing to try something that had never been done before. Above us, the stars sang their evening song, a melody composed of nuclear fusion and possibility, performed by beings who had learned that the phrase impossible was just the beginning of the most interesting conversations. The humans had not just defied the chasm between their primitive technology and our advanced civilization. They had turned it into a bridge, a pathway to futures that none of us had ever imagined, and somehow, impossibly, they had convinced the universe itself to help them build it.